The snow fell harder than usual in the north. Winds howled like wolves as Jon Snow stood on the wall of Castle Black, watching the white land stretch endlessly. It had been days since the letter came from Stannis Baratheon, the man who claimed the Iron Throne, and had now camped at the ruins of Carhold. But this time, the letter didn't demand loyalty. It offered something else, an alliance. Jon held the letter tightly, reading the words again. Stannis was asking for help, not just to take Winterfell from Ramsay Bolton, but to restore order in the north. In return, he promised to name Jon the true Lord of Winterfell, even though he wore the black of the Night's Watch. Jon had always told himself he didn't care for titles or family lands, but something deep inside pulled at him. Maybe it was Ghost, growling low whenever the name Bolton was mentioned. Maybe it was the memory of Robb, the way he died, the Stark banners burnt. Or maybe it was time for the North to rise again. Jon walked into the hall, where Sam sat reading, always buried in old scrolls. "What would you do if you had the chance to take back your home?" Jon asked, not looking directly at him. Sam looked up, confused. "Winterfell, but—" "You're a man of the Watch, Jon. I know. But I'm also a Stark, in all the ways that matter." Sam didn't answer for a moment. He just nodded. "Then you already know what you want to do." Jon left Castle Black 2 days later. He met Stannis near the edge of the woods, where the cold wind snapped at banners bearing the fiery heart of the Lord of Light. The king stood tall in black armor, his face stern and tired but still strong. Beside him, Davos Seaworth gave Jon a nod of respect. "You came," Stannis said, his voice as cold as the north. "I didn't come for you, your grace," Jon replied. "I came for Winterfell, and for the people suffering under the Boltons." A long silence followed. Then Stannis said, "Good, I can work with that." Plans were made quickly. Jon knew the north better than any of Stannis's men. He knew the small paths through the woods, the villages loyal to House Stark, and the weaknesses of Winterfell's walls. Stannis had the soldiers, the supplies, and the ambition. Together they could bring down the monster ruling from Winterfell, but there was one problem. The Boltons had numbers. Not just soldiers, but houses that had bent the knee out of fear or gain. House Umber, House Karstark, even some Manderleys. If they wanted to win, they needed the support of true Northerners. And that meant Jon had to do something he never thought he would: break his vows. At a secret meeting, Jon stood before a group of Northern lords who had quietly answered the call. His cloak still bore the black of the Watch, but his voice was no longer that of a mere steward. "The Boltons betrayed the North," he said, looking at each man. "They butchered Robb Stark, our king in the North. They flayed the men who stood against them. And now Ramsay Bolton sits in Winterfell, while the bones of Starks lie cold in their crypts. I won't let that stand. Not anymore. Will you?" Some looked away. Others clenched their fists. But one by one they stood, old men and young ones, farmers and swordsmen. They remembered Winterfell. They remembered the honor of the Starks. And they remembered the blood that was spilled. The North was stirring. Meanwhile, inside Winterfell, Ramsay Bolton watched the flames crackle in the hearth. A message had arrived. His scouts had seen movement in the woods. Unusual movement. "They're coming for me," Ramsay whispered, a smile stretching across his pale face. Let them try, but even Ramsay, with all his cruelty, didn't know what was coming. Not this time, because for the first time in years, the North wasn't fighting alone. It was Jon Snow and Stannis Baratheon, fire and ice, sword and strategy, and they were about to make Ramsay Bolton bleed. The snowstorm came down heavy the next morning, blanketing the north in a thick sheet of white. But even that couldn't hide the sound of hooves crunching through the frost. Stannis' army had started moving. Rows of armored men marched silently behind banners that flapped like torn wings in the wind. Their breath fogged the air like smoke, but their eyes burned with purpose. Jon rode at the front with Stannis. He had traded his black cloak for one of dark grey, stitched with the direwolf sigil of House Stark. It wasn't official, he hadn't been legitimized yet, but the sight of that wolf gave hope to the men behind him, and fear to the ones ahead. "We strike before they expect us," Jon said, leaning close to Stannis. If we wait, they'll tighten the walls, cut off the roads. Stannis nodded. Then we won't wait. But something was bothering Jon. His instincts twitched. Ramsay wasn't stupid. He was cruel, yes, twisted, sick in the head, but not dumb. He wouldn't sit idle in Winterfell while an army marched on him. He'd be doing something. Something dark. Just then a rider came galloping toward them. His horse was near collapse, foam spraying from its mouth. The man dropped to the ground, shaking from cold and fear. "It's the village of Little Snow," he panted. "Burned to the ground. Everyone inside flayed." Ramsay left a message. "Nailed to a tree." Jon's fist tightened. "What did it say?" The rider swallowed hard. "Come and see." Jon's blood turned to ice. Stannis said nothing for a moment, then turned to his men. "We move faster. No more camping at night. We march in shifts. We end this before the bastard flays another soul." As they moved forward, Jon couldn't stop thinking of the people in that village. Innocent people, children all gone, burned, butchered, their skins nailed to trees. This wasn't just war for Ramsay. This was his game. They reached Deepwood Moat 3 days later and found Lady Asha Greyjoy chained in the dungeons. Stannis had taken the place earlier, but Jon convinced him to spare her now. She had no love for the Boltons. And more importantly, she had men who could fight. "You want me to help a Stark?" Asha asked, wiping blood from her face. "I want you to help take down Ramsay Bolton," Jon replied. "He flays people for sport. He enjoys it." Asha looked at him, then laughed bitterly. "Well, I always hated pretty boys with knives." "You've got yourself a shipborne army." Together their forces grew. More houses started to bend quietly toward them. House Mormont sent 50 good fighters, and Lady Lyanna Mormont's letter was as sharp as her tongue. The North remembers. House Mormont stands with the true king, and with the blood of Ned Stark. Still, Winterfell loomed in the distance like a stone beast waiting in silence. Ramsay watched it all from the tower windows. He knew they were coming, and he wasn't scared. He had a plan. In the dark dungeons below the castle, he stood over Theon Greyjoy, or what was left of him. "You were a prince once," Ramsay whispered, circling Theon like a snake. "And now look at you. A rat in my cage." Theon didn't speak. He never did anymore. Ramsay smiled. "Jon Snow is coming. You know him, don't you? Brother of the Wolves? Maybe I'll send him your head in a box. Or better yet, make him watch what I do to Sansa next." Theon flinched. That one name still hurt. Somewhere deep inside him, a spark remained. Back in the forest, Jon sat near the fire, staring at the flames. He didn't sleep. Not much anymore. Not since the news of Sansa had reached him. She was alive. Ramsay's wife, trapped inside the very place they were trying to take. "I won't let him touch her again," Jon muttered. Davos, who sat nearby, looked up. "You love her?" "She's my sister," Jon replied. But his voice trembled. "I've lost too many already." Davos nodded slowly. "Then fight like it." The next morning the snow cleared. The army was less than a day from Winterfell. Scouts reported movement near the tree line. Ramsay's forces were gathering, and at their center was a tall wooden cross painted red. A man was nailed to it, alive. Jon rode ahead with a small party. As he got closer, his heart sank. It was one of the village boys from Little Snow, his skin half flayed, his mouth sewn shut, and on the cross a message carved in blood. "You bring fire. I bring screams." Ramsay Jon turned away, bile rising in his throat. No more delays, no more games. The war for Winterfell had begun. The army didn't sleep that night. They lit no fires, ate cold bread, sat in silence. Jon stood on a small hill with Stannis, looking at Winterfell in the distance. Its towers rose from the snow like sharp claws. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of blood. "I hate that place," Jon whispered. "So do I," Stannis said without emotion. "But hate is no weapon. Steel is." Jon nodded, but his heart felt heavy. He kept thinking about the boy on the cross. Ramsay didn't just want to win. He wanted to send a message. Fear was his game. Pain was his language. And if they failed tomorrow, the North would belong to a monster. "We attack at dawn," Stannis said. "And this time, we don't retreat." Just then, a scout rode in fast and breathless. "Your Grace, Lord Snow." It's House Manderley. They're marching from White Harbor with 500 men. John's eyes lit up. For us? No, my lord, the scout replied. They say they're neutral, but they're bringing food wagons. Supplying both sides, Stannis grunted. Cowards. They want to see who wins before picking a side. John didn't speak. He understood the fear. The Boltons had power, but that made him more determined. If they won tomorrow, the Manderleys, and every other house in the north, would have no choice. They'd see the wolf rise again. At dawn, the snow stopped. The sky turned red like blood dripping across the clouds. The battlefield was wide and open, black ground broken by patches of ice and frozen mud. Perfect for cavalry, dangerous for retreat. John stood in front of his men. They were a mix of northern rebels, Night's Watch deserters, ironborn warriors, and Stannis' disciplined troops. A strange army, but united by purpose. You know what they did, John shouted. To rob, to our people.
To the north!
The men roared in anger. We're not just fighting for a castle, he continued. We're fighting for every child skinned alive, every woman beaten, every man hanged for refusing to kneel. Another roar, louder this time. John looked around. Faces hard, eyes fierce, no more silence, no more fear. Today, the North remembers. Behind him, Ghost howled loud and long. On the other side of the field, Ramsay Bolton smiled lazily, sitting atop his black horse. Beside him were his men, well-fed, well-armed, and cruel. Flayed man banners whipped in the wind. His father's banner, but Ramsay had made it his own. Let them come, he said. I've prepared a surprise. He raised his hand. Archers dragged out 5 people in chains, villagers, young and old. They were tied to wooden stakes in the center of the field. One of them was a girl, barely 10 years old. John saw them from across the plain. His heart twisted. He wants us to charge blind, he said. Draw us in. Make us reckless, Stannis rode up. Then we don't play his game. Send a small group. Cut them loose fast. We hold the line. John nodded and mounted his horse. He wasn't going to wait. He would lead the group himself. As they rode across the field, Ramsay watched, bored. He's soft. Look at him, risking everything for peasants. He'll lose. Soft men always lose, but what Ramsay didn't expect was what happened next. As John reached the hostages, arrows flew toward him. But his group had raised shields, forming a wall. The arrows bounced off. The girl screamed. John jumped off his horse and slashed her bonds quickly. One by one, they freed the prisoners, dragging them to safety. Then the horns blew. Stannis' army moved forward in formation. Shields locked, spears raised. The Ironborn flanked the right. The wildlings John had secretly brought from the other side of the wall moved on the left. The trap had failed. Ramsay's smug smile faded. Send the dogs. He snapped. His hounds, huge beasts trained to rip men apart, were released. But the moment they ran forward, Ghost sprinted ahead with a pack of smaller wolves. Wild wolves from the woods. John had planned this too. The dogs met the wolves, and they didn't win. Then the armies clashed, steel rang on steel. Men screamed. The snow turned red. John cut through Bolton soldiers like a storm, fast, fierce, and without mercy. He saw Stannis holding the center, Davos shouting orders, and Asher cutting down riders like fire through dry leaves. And then he saw him, Ramsay, sitting calmly at the back, not even fighting. Just watching. John's rage exploded. He charged through the chaos, sword raised, cutting down anyone in his path. Ramsay saw him coming and turned his horse, but John was faster. He leapt, grabbed Ramsay's leg and pulled him down. The battle roared around them. But in that moment, it was just the two of them. Snow, blood, and hate. Ramsay grinned, drawing his blade. Hello, Snow. John didn't smile back. He just attacked. Snow crunched under their boots as John slammed into Ramsay. Both men hit the ground hard, rolling through blood and ice. Swords clashed, their blades scraping with a sharp, angry sound. Ramsay pushed John back and swung wildly, his grin twisted like his mind. He wasn't scared. He was excited. You came all this way for me? Ramsay sneered, dodging John's strike. Was it the sister? Or do you just enjoy playing hero? John didn't answer. He attacked again, fast and brutal. Ramsay blocked it but stumbled back. His armor was light, designed more for show than war. You know, Ramsay hissed, circling him. Sansa still screams your name when she cries. You should have heard her wedding night. That was it. Jon's rage exploded. He didn't fight like a trained soldier anymore. He fought like a brother, a man who'd had enough. He swung with both hands, forcing Ramsay onto his knees. A punch to the face, another to the ribs. Ramsay spit blood but laughed through it all. You're just like me, he wheezed. Violence feels good, doesn't it? Jon raised his sword, ready to end it, ready to drive it through Ramsay's heart and silence him forever. But then he stopped, because behind him, horns were blaring again. Panic rose in the wind. Jon turned his head. The right flank, Stannis' side, was collapsing. Bolton reinforcements had come from the rear, led by a group of Karstarks who had hidden in the woods. Hundreds of fresh soldiers were charging into the chaos. Stannis' men were being pushed back, dying in the snow. Ramsay used the distraction. He kicked Jon hard and ran. Jon hit the ground with a thud, but forced himself up quickly. He wanted to chase him, but the battle was changing. The enemy was gaining ground. If he didn't act now, they'd all be slaughtered. He looked back at Ramsay, disappearing into the fog of war. Not yet, Jon thought. You won't die today, but you'll die. He mounted a fallen rider's horse and galloped toward the collapsing right side. Men shouted and screamed. Bodies lay broken in piles. The Bolton reinforcements were smashing through the shield wall. Then Jon saw Stannis, bloodied but still fighting. Jon rode up beside him. We're losing the flank. Then we hold it with fire, Stannis growled. He signaled a group of archers. Flaming arrows flew through the air, lighting the ice-covered trees behind the enemy. Fire roared up in the woods, turning the path into a wall of flame. Some of the Bolton reinforcements got caught in the blaze, their screams echoing into the sky. But it wasn't enough. They needed more men. Suddenly, a horn blew from the east. Deep and loud. Not theirs. Jon turned quickly. Through the smoke, another army was arriving, banners high, horses in rows. Manderley banners. Jon narrowed his eyes. Are they joining us, or them? But then, a massive man on horseback raised a northern banner, with the Stark direwolf flying beside the white merman. It was Wyman Manderley. His troops charged into the Bolton side without warning, catching them from behind. Jon grinned. The North remembers, he whispered. Chaos followed. Bolton men, now surrounded, began breaking ranks. The wolves had turned. The tide was shifting. Jon led a fresh charge, this time straight into the middle of the Bolton line. His sword moved like lightning. He found the Karstarks, shouting orders, and cut them down one by one. He didn't feel tired. He didn't feel cold. He only felt purpose. Ramsay was watching again, this time from the wall of Winterfell. His smile was gone. Inside the castle, Sansa sat in her chambers, listening to the sounds of war. The walls trembled with every blow. Her maid, a quiet girl named Myra, looked out the window. "My lady," she said softly, "he's here." "Your brother?" "Jon Snow, he's leading them." Sansa stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but her eyes hardened. Then it's time. She pulled something from under the bed, a dagger she had hidden for weeks. Her eyes were cold, but focused. "I won't be a prisoner when they take this castle," she whispered. Not again. Outside, the Bolton army was breaking. Stannis' banners rose higher. The Ironborn swept through the outer walls. Ghost ran wild, biting and clawing through anything in his way. Jon reached the gates of Winterfell, just as Ramsay retreated inside. The doors slammed shut behind him. Jon stared up at the walls, covered in snow and blood. His eyes locked on the towers above. He wasn't done. "Bring the battering ram," he shouted, because Ramsay Bolton was running out of places to hide. The gates of Winterfell groaned as the battering ram struck for the third time. Boom! Wood cracked but still held. Snow blew across the courtyard, mixing with smoke from the burning battlefield. Behind Jon, soldiers gathered, bloodied but alive, waiting for the final push. Stannis stood beside him, his face covered in ash. "This castle has stood for centuries. It won't fall easy," Jon nodded. "Then we make it fall the hard way." Inside the castle, Ramsay paced the hall, furious. His guards stayed back, scared of getting too close. His smugness was gone. He wasn't smiling anymore. How did this happen? He barked. They were supposed to break. Where is the Carstock cavalry? Where is Maester Tybalt? Where is— Dead, a voice said from the shadows. Ramsay spun. It was Maester Tybalt's apprentice, blood on his robes, shaking. They're all dead. Manderley betrayed us. They're in the courtyard. Ramsay's hands clenched. He had underestimated Jon Snow, too focused on torture, too drunk on fear. Now the wolf was at his door, and he had nothing left but the walls. No matter. Ramsay always had one trick left. He turned to his guards. Bring Reek. They hesitated. Now, he shouted. Moments later, Theon Greyjoy, dirty, thin and broken, was dragged into the hall. His eyes were empty. His spirit almost gone. Do you remember Winterfell? Ramsay said softly, walking around him like a vulture. You betrayed the Starks once. You burned their home. Now, you'll defend it. He handed Theon a blade. Kill Jon Snow. Theon looked at the sword, then at Ramsay, and for the first time in a long time, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not weakness, but rage. No, Theon whispered. Ramsay tilted his head. What? Theon gripped the sword tighter. I said, no, then he swung. Steel flashed. Theon slashed Ramsay across the face, cutting deep into his cheek. Blood sprayed. Ramsay stumbled back, howling like a wounded animal. Guards rushed forward, but Theon turned and ran, disappearing down the halls like a ghost in the storm. Outside, the gates of Winterfell cracked again. Boom. This time wood splintered. Jon stepped forward, his sword drawn. Ready? He shouted. A final crash, and the gates burst open. Jon led the charge inside. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Bolton men tried to fight, but their numbers were broken. Stannis' soldiers swept through them like a tide. Arrows flew from the ramparts, but Asher Greyjoy's Ironborn had already climbed the walls, taking out the archers with blades to the throat. Jon fought like he was born for it. The northern soldiers followed him into the halls, room by room, cutting down what remained of Ramsay's army. And then he saw her, at the far end of the corridor, Sansa. She stood tall in a blood-red gown, a dagger in her hand. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned. Sansa, Jon whispered, his breath catching. She didn't cry. She didn't run to him. She stepped forward slowly. You came back. Jon moved closer, lowering his sword. I would have burned the whole world to reach you. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then finally her face broke. Tears fell, silent and warm. She rushed into his arms. Behind them, the fighting still raged, but for a moment Jon held the last of his family, alive and breathing. It wasn't over yet. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Ramsay appeared, his face bleeding, his eyes wild. He held a bow now, an arrow notched and aimed. Jon turned, pushing Sansa behind him. You ruined everything, Ramsay hissed. You don't deserve this castle. You're just a bastard. You're nothing. Jon stepped forward. Then shoot me. Let's end it, Ramsay smiled, lips trembling. Gladly. But just as he loosed the arrow, Ghost came from the side, leaping out of the darkness. The arrow missed. Ramsay screamed as the direwolf tackled him to the ground. Jon ran forward, grabbing Ramsay's bow and smashing it against the wall. Ghost growled, fangs at Ramsay's throat. Call him off! Ramsay cried, trying to crawl away. But Jon didn't. He looked down at the man who had skinned innocents, tortured Sansa, murdered children. For sport, he knelt beside him. You said I was nothing, Jon said. But I'm still standing. And you're bleeding on the floor. Then he stood and turned to Sansa. This isn't my justice to serve. Sansa stepped forward. She looked Ramsay in the eyes, calm and cold. You fed my brother to your dogs, she said. You broke my body. You tried to break my soul. She paused, but I'm still here. Then she gave a single nod to Ghost. The direwolf snarled and lunged. Jon didn't turn back. He walked away. Sansa beside him. Winterfell was theirs again. And Ramsay Bolton was no more. Winterfell was quiet. For the first time in years, no screams echoed through its halls. No flayed bodies hung from the walls. No wolves howled in pain, only in triumph. Snow still fell gently over the courtyard, covering the blood like a blanket trying to hide the truth. Bodies were being cleared. The fires had been put out. The air smelled of ash, steel, and something else. Hope. John stood in the great hall. The fire roared in the hearth, warming stone that had once felt like a grave. But he didn't feel warmth, not yet. Victory had come, but peace hadn't. Across the room, Stannis Baratheon paced like a caged lion. The castle is ours. The north is quiet for now, but don't mistake quiet for loyalty. The northern lords are waiting to see what happens next. They'll follow if we lead right, Jon said, though his voice didn't sound confident even to himself. Stannis turned sharply. No, they'll follow if they see power. Mercy won you this battle, Lord Snow, but power will keep it. Jon looked away. He hated the truth in that. Just then the doors opened. Davos entered, nodding to both of them. The lords have begun to arrive. Manderley Glover Serwyn, even Lady Lyanna Mormont, and the Umbers? Stannis asked, eyes narrowing. Davos shook his head. No sign of them. The traitors may be hiding or dead. Jon stepped forward. Then let them come. Let them see Winterfell restored. Let them see who we are. Stannis didn't argue, but his face remained hard. They'll also see that you broke your Night's Watch vows. Jon stiffened. I did what I had to do. I don't question your reasons, Stannis said. Only your future. The Watch may not forgive what you've done, and neither will the Crown unless we make it official. What do you mean? You must be legitimized. No longer Jon Snow, you must become Jon Stark. Jon froze. He had dreamed of hearing those words when he was a boy. Dreamed of being a Stark in name, not just in blood. A real brother to Robb, a true son of Ned Stark, not a bastard. Now it was possible, but the cost of it felt heavier than he expected. I'll consider it, Jon said quietly. Don't take too long, Stannis replied. The North won't wait. Later that night, the great hall filled with northern lords. They sat cautiously, looking around the room like it might still bite them. But when Jon and Sansa entered, shoulder to shoulder, the Stark sigil behind them, they stood. Wyman Manderley spoke first, rising from his seat with effort. I served with your father, Jon Snow, and I followed your brother into war. Now I see both of them in you. Jon nodded respectfully. Lyanna Mormont stood next, small but fierce. You're not just a Snow. You've got the blood of the wolf. And the North remembers. Sansa looked out over the lords. We don't want more war, but we won't kneel to fear any more. Ramsay is gone. The Boltons are finished, and Winterfell belongs to the North again. The hall rumbled with quiet approval. Even the hard men seemed to soften. But then Lord Glover spoke, arms crossed. You speak of peace, Lady Sansa. But how can there be peace when a man breaks his sacred vows and wears a crown made of ashes? Jon stepped forward. I didn't fight for a crown. I fought for the North, for its people. For every man, woman, and child tortured under the Boltons. Glover eyed him carefully. And what now? Will you return to the Wall? Or will you take your place as the head of House Stark? Jon looked down at his hands. They were still stained with blood, still shaking from the weight of battle. He opened his mouth, but Sansa spoke first. He's already the head of House Stark, she said firmly. He may not have our father's name, but he has his heart. And I trust no one more to lead the North. A pause. Then Lord Manderley stood again. Then let it be done. One by one, they knelt. The king in the North. Jon stood frozen, heart pounding. The king in the North. Voices rose louder, echoing off the stone. The king in the North. Jon turned to Sansa. Her eyes were misty, her lips trembling in a proud smile. She whispered, They've chosen you. He looked out over the lords, the same people who once doubted him. Now they saw him not as a bastard, not as a broken brother, but as the Stark he always was. Still inside, Jon felt the weight, because the Wall still waited, and the dead beyond it still marched. Winter was still coming. The hall was still echoing with voices when Jon stepped outside alone. The king in the North. It had filled his ears like thunder. And yet, now that he stood under the cold sky of Winterfell, with the snow falling lightly on his shoulders, it felt silent again. Ghost appeared beside him, his white fur glowing in the moonlight. Jon knelt down and scratched behind the direwolf's ears. I didn't want this, he whispered. Ghost let out a quiet huff, as if answering, but it wanted you. Behind him, the doors creaked open. Sansa walked out, wrapping her cloak tighter. "They chose you, Jon. He didn't turn. You should have been the one they crowned," he said. "You're the true-born Stark." Sansa walked beside him, looking out across the snowy fields. "I know," she said softly. "But they needed you more than they needed me. They needed your fight, your honor, your pain." He finally looked at her. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail trying to save them, not trying to save yourself. That's why they trust you." They stood there together for a while, just brother and sister under the stars. But the night didn't stay calm for long. A rider came crashing through the gate, his horse almost collapsing in the snow. He dropped from the saddle, panting. "Message from Castle Black," he gasped. "Urgent." Jon rushed forward and took the scroll. The wax seal was broken. The words were rushed, shaky. "The wall is under attack. The dead are moving. We held them off, but only barely. We need help. We need you." Jon read the letter twice, then again. His chest tightened. "They're coming," Sansa frowned. "Who?" He met her eyes. "The White Walkers." Inside the war room, Jon called a council. Stannis, Davos, Asher, and the Northern Lords gathered around the long table. The old maps of the North lay open, but they all knew where the real danger lay now, beyond the wall. "They attacked Castle Black 2 nights ago," Jon explained. "Only a small group, a test. But they broke through the first gate." Stannis leaned forward, his voice low. "So the stories are true," Jon nodded. "They aren't just stories. They're real, and they don't stop. You kill one and 10 more take its place. They don't sleep. They don't tire, and they're heading south." The lords looked uneasy. Manderley wiped sweat from his brow. "We've just fought one war. You're saying another is already here?" "A worse one," Jon said. "The Boltons flayed people. These things eat them." Asher raised an eyebrow. "So what now?" "We march beyond the wall, into that cursed land." "No," Jon said. "We defend the wall, and we prepare. With everything we have," Stannis stood. "Then we ride in 2 days. I'll take my men north. You gather yours." Jon looked up. "You'd fight beside me." Stannis met his eyes. "The realm won't matter if it's buried in snow and corpses. I want the Iron Throne, but I won't rule over a graveyard." Jon gave him a small nod. For once, the Baratheon king didn't seem like a rival. He seemed like a soldier standing against the dark. That night, Jon found himself in the crypts of Winterfell. The candles flickered as he stood before the statue of his father, Ned Stark, the man who raised him, the man who had loved him in quiet, firm ways. Jon stared at the stone face. "They call me king now, but I still don't know who I am." The cold wind whispered through the tunnels like a ghost. Jon sighed. "I need your guidance, father." One last time, a voice echoed behind him. He would be proud. Jon turned. It was Sam. He had arrived with the messenger, quietly slipping into Winterfell's libraries. Jon rushed forward. "You're alive." "Barely," Sam smiled. "But alive." He held up an old, dusty book. "I found something. About the White Walkers. About what hurts them." Jon leaned in. "What?" "Not just dragonglass. Valyrian steel, fire. There's more. There's something older. Something hidden." "Where?" Sam took a breath. "The Citadel doesn't know. But the children of the forest might have left clues. In the Heart Tree, the one in the north. Beyond the wall." Jon's face went pale. "You're saying I have to go back?" Sam nodded. "We all do." Jon looked at the book. Then at the tomb. Everything he loved was behind him. Everything he feared was ahead. He drew his sword slowly, Longclaw gleaming in the candlelight. "Then we ride at dawn." The wind howled like a beast in pain. Jon stood on top of the wall again, just like he had in his younger days. But now he was not a steward, not a bastard boy. He was a king, and below him, the North had gathered. Thousands of men waited, northern soldiers, wildlings, ironborn, even Baratheon knights. They were all here, camped in the frozen shadow of Castle Black. Tents lined the snow-covered fields. Fires burned, but the cold still cut through cloaks and skin like blades. Stannis stood beside Jon, his face as grim as the frostbite on his fingers. "If we go beyond the wall, we step into Death's land. We've lived under its shadow for too long," Jon answered. "Now it's time to face it." Sam had remained behind at Winterfell with Sansa, poring over old scrolls, hoping to find more answers. But Jon didn't have the luxury of waiting. He'd seen the Dead March once before, and now he would not let them pass again. Torches were lit, the gates creaked open. Jon rode through first, Ghost padding silently at his side. The army followed. North of the wall, the world felt cursed. Trees stood like skeletons. The snow was thicker, deeper, colder. Nothing moved, not even the wind after a while. The silence was a warning. They reached the heart tree 2 days later. It stood in the center of an ancient frozen grove, its face carved deep into the white bark, red sap leaking from its eyes like tears. Jon dismounted. He knelt before it, placing his hand on the roots. They were icy cold. "Tell me what I need to know," he whispered, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, the wind stirred. The branches creaked like whispering voices. Ghost growled low. Then the ground began to tremble. It started as a soft rumble. Then the sound of cracking ice. Then came the dead, thousands of them, pale, rotting bodies with empty eyes. Some wore old Night's Watch cloaks, some wore armor from old battles. All walked in silence, their heads turned toward Jon, and behind them, the White Walkers got cold blue eyes. Frozen swords, mounted on undead horses, they rode like kings of ice. Jon rose slowly. "Form the lines!" he shouted. The soldiers moved fast. Stannis ordered the flanks. Wildlings drew their crude but deadly blades. Archers lit their arrows. Asher's Ironborn held the center. They had one chance. The dead charged first, sprinting with inhuman speed. The battle exploded. Steel met bone. Swords clashed. Men screamed. Horses reared. The snow turned red again, just like at Winterfell. Jon fought at the front, Longclaw slicing through the undead like a torch through paper. Each one he cut fell for good. Valyrian steel did its work. But there were too many. Far too many. Then came the walkers. One of them rode straight for Jon. He jumped from his horse and landed silently in front of him, raising his icy blade. Jon attacked first. Steel met ice. Sparks flew. The sound rang like bells in the frozen air. They fought hard, Jon striking low and fast, the walker graceful and deadly. Every blow Jon landed was blocked. Every slash from the walker nearly took his life. Then, with a roar, Ghost leapt onto the walker's back, biting deep into his neck. Jon used the moment. He swung Longclaw and took the walker's head clean. Off the creature collapsed into shards of ice. A cheer rang out, but it was short. The Night King had arrived, tall, silent, cruel. He raised one hand, and the dead rose again. Every soldier they had, lost just minutes ago, stood back up. Now wearing blue eyes, even the wildlings who had fought beside Jon, even some of the men from Castle Black. "No," Jon whispered, but he had no time to grieve. The battle started again, this time twice as deadly. Then came a blast of fire, dragon fire. All heads turned to the sky. From the clouds came a roar, and Drogon burst through. Wings wide, flames pouring from his mouth. On his back, Daenerys Targaryen. She had come. Flames swept across the battlefield, burning whites into ash. The north roared in hope. The Night King stared up, unmoved, but now outnumbered. Together, Jon and Daenerys charged, he on foot, she from above. Jon faced the Night King in the snow, their blades clashing like two gods in a storm. At the same time, Drogon breathed fire from above, clearing the field. In one final move, Jon caught the Night King's blade, twisted, and drove Longclaw through his heart. The Night King didn't scream. He just stared, cold and empty, as his body shattered like glass. The dead collapsed, all of them. Silence returned to the forest. The war was over. Back at Winterfell, Jon stood atop the walls once more. Beside him was Daenerys. Behind him, the banners of the North. He had kept his promise. The North was free, the dead were gone, and Jon Snow was more than a king. He was a legend.